Hey, this is Passy from Passy's World of ICT with the white hat. And today we're going to be having a look at XML file types. So we'll be learning what an XML file is and spending quite a bit of time doing that. And we're also going to learn how to read some XML data and out of a file and get it displayed in Visual Basic, a couple of ways of doing that. And we will just touch on how one way you can write XML data. Our next lesson though, which will be on writing XML files, which will be out next week, that's going to show you a much better way of doing everything using kind of a processor to do it that's built into Visual Basic. But anyway, this is kind of this week's lesson, and we're looking at reading XML files in Visual Basic. Okay then, so let's go. So look, this is an XML file. Don't let it kind of spin your head out straight away at the moment. We'll just have a very quick look. But see, it's got these kind of arrowheads on it and things about records and arrowheads and player. In this dark writing here is the actual data. This is our tennis dream team, which we've been working on in some of the lessons. And yours doesn't have to be a tennis dream team. It could be soccer players. But you can see we've got 4 people there off our dream team. We're just saying what country they're from and what their birth date is basically. And that is storing the data in this format, which is called an XML file. Now, if you've done some web programming or done HTML, these things will kind of look familiar as called tags, the things with the arrowheads around them. And that's where the similarity ends. Like, these are totally different to HTML used for making web pages. They do both have these tags in them, these kind of things in between the 2 arrowheads, but that's about where the similarities end. It's a bit like, you know, a car has wheels on it, and so does an A300 Airbus plane, but that's kind of where it ends. After that, they're just totally different from each other. So yeah, these guys both have tags, HTML and XML, but they're really totally different to each other. So we just need to say that right from the output. So we're going to be looking at the structure of XML files, another giant value-packed lesson here. So you might want to take breaks in the lesson, like after we've been through XML files, what they are, maybe take a break then do the program that writes an XML record, and then take another break and then do the rest of it where we're reading XML records. But this is all the things we're going to do in this lesson. I've even got a couple of sample exam questions for you and a preview of the next lesson that's going to be writing XML files using data tables. All right, so the XML file type, let's get into it. Before we can do any VBNet coding to process these XML files, we've got to work out what is an XML file? So what are the structure of these things and how they work? So XML stands for Extensible Markup Language, but really just think of it that you've got data there, and then you've got those arrowheads and kind of your record and field names also present in the file. So it's kind of got these things called meta tags that describe what's in the file, but we'll get onto that later. Now, applications that can read XML files, there are so many of them. Good old Microsoft Excel will, Windows Notepad, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Chrome, Safari, Visual Basic, of course, also Dreamweaver and WordPress. They can all use and read XML files. And another file type which is common for exchanging data and that a lot of applications recognize is comma-separated files, CSV, but we'll be doing them in other lessons further on in our course. I'm not talking about CSV at the moment. XML files are great for transporting data between different software and systems. Like our Passy's World of ICT website, actually, all of the backups for that are written out to an XML file, and that XML file is just saved and we back it up to the cloud, okay? So all sorts of things can be done with XML files. Now, if you move house and change your local doctor, like everything here in Australia is on computers, so on his computer system where he works, your local doctor where you used to live, he's got all your medical records and your data and things. Now, when you go to the new neighborhood, wherever you've moved to, and get a new doctor, the new doctor can get all of your previous medical history and whatnot. It's just transferred using an XML file. And if you want to download big files of statistics from the government or things from websites, often, heaps of times they're XML files. So XML is just like everywhere, and it's a really important file type. And if you're going to be a computer programmer, you've got to learn XML files. There's no way around it. Now, they're written in completely plain text, even though we've got those arrowhead things. They're just sort of characters which are on your keyboard and part of the text. So like the CSV files, because they're just written completely in plain text, they're very compact and small, which is another great thing. They're easy to pass around and send to people because they're so small. And look, it does use those tags like HTML, but that's the only similarity. So don't think of these as being anything to do with necessarily web pages and HTML. XML is just a file type like CSV is, like a Word document out of Word, .docx is, or like a PowerPoint file, .pptx. It's just another file type. So XML compared to CSV files. So in this lesson, we're just going to work on some summary data here for our tennis dream team. So we're just looking at small files, so it'll be easy to code and easy to show you as an example. We've got their name, their country, and their birth date. Now, we would expand this out later when we build our Dream Team application to have a whole lot more fields and identities about the players. But today we're just going with, name, country, and birth date. So that's our data there. Now, if we're going to put that in this CSV file, it'll pack up very small and nice in a plain text file. We just have like the name, comma, the country, comma, and the date. And then the next record, name, country, date. So you just separate them with commas, and that's comma separated values. So you can export a CSV file out of Microsoft Excel and get that plain text file, which is CSV, which we're going to be covering in a set of different lessons later on. Now, here's the same data as XML, and you might be thinking, oh, well, gee, the XML looks so much more complicated. Well, maybe it does when you first look at it, but look, really, it is so much better than the comma separated value, because the comma separated value, it's only got the data values, the names, countries, and this date here, you don't really know what this date is. Was this the date when they first started playing tennis? Was this the date when they won their first major Grand Slam tournament, or they got into the top 4 in a tournament and played in finals? What is this date here? We don't know from the CSV, it's just a date, and we can see it's a date. Whereas in the XML, it has these meta tags that describe what each item of data is. And you can see where these numbers are that are dates. It's got birth date. It's got kind of this arrowheads enclosing birth date. And then after that, it's got this slash sign, this forward slash, and birth date as well to tell you where that field ends. So in between these two tags of birth date and slash birth date, that's where the actual birth date data is for this particular player that we've got here in the XML file. All right. So XML is much better because it's got these meta tags that tell you about the data. So like that date, we know exactly what that date is. It's a birth date. And it also makes it a lot easier for a human to read it and understand it, because not only are you seeing like here in the dark font what the data is, but you're also seeing little sort of labels and things there flagging what it is, so you know exactly what the data is. So here's that typical XML file structure. Now, what's it all about? It's got that really weird looking stuff on the top. So let's look at that first. That's a header record, and that tells any apps that are processing it, like if you want to read this into Microsoft Notepad, or if you want to read this into Excel or into a VBNet program, into Adobe Dreamweaver, that will tell it that, hey, this is an XML file here, and the encoding for the file is UTF-8. Now, we don't want to get into encoding, but UTF-8 is Unicode, which means you can have a lot of special symbols, like you can have Japanese and Chinese characters for foreign languages and things like that, okay? So it's a very comprehensive encoding format. And then we've got these up the top. So that's just that. And now, if we go right down the bottom here, there's no footer in here. There's no kind of ending record. It's just like when we're reading other files, as VBNet's going to read through this, or any application, it's just going to run out of characters to read right down this bottom corner here. And so it knows that's the end of the file. It doesn't need some special thing put in there or a special record at the end to tell it that that's the end of the file. All right, now underneath that heading, we've got a thing here in arrowheads that's called records. Now that's the name of the XML file that we're going to put all of these player records into. So look, we've just been lazy and called ours records. And down the bottom, we've got a arrowheads with a slash records to say this is where the whole file ends down the bottom here. So what we've done there is you could have used any name. We could have called that Dream Team. We could have called that tennis players. You could have called it my file. Okay, so that's just a name you're giving to all of this XML data which you're putting in here. This is the file. So our file is called records, and in each record we've got sort of this player here and then a slash player for where it ends. So this tells us this is all of the information for one player. So this is one player's record. So we've got Anna in here with a country and a birthday. That's one player. Up above there we had Alden with his information. We've got Bernarda with her information down here, and then we've got player slash player down the bottom. And we've got the Australian guy, John Patrick Smith, in there, all right? So in between where the records are indicated with the player slash player, we've got each of the fields. So we've got the name starts here, this name's Anna Blinkova, and slash name, that's where it ends. So we'll be able to read these in our VBNet program and know what is what as we're working our way through the file with a for next loop, as we'll see later on when we write the program. So yeah, that's the structure, and look, you might not be understanding this straight away. It looks super complicated when you first see one of these, but look, by the end of this lesson and a bit of practice, it'll all be very familiar, and you'll appreciate just how useful and good XML files are. So the Apple software, whatever's reading it, knows the file hierarchy structure. So we do have a hierarchy. The whole big thing is the file, which we've called records. Inside the file, you have individual player records, and inside each individual player record, you have the field data for that player. So it's kind of like a hierarchy. We start big, and then we go medium, and then we go right down to the small level of each field. And so apps that read this see the header, know, hey, this is an XML file. It's in UTF-8, and we'll know how to interpret what's in it. So there was indentation or pushing in, you would have noticed there. So it's best you use indentation in your XML files. Now, technically, you don't have to. You could just write them straight down the left-hand margin with no pushing in or indentations at all. But that would make manually editing the XML document extremely difficult and understanding it difficult. So the standard that's a default that most people use is 2 character spaces. You don't have to use 2, but listen, most people use 2. So you can see in our Notepad here editor, we've got part of our XML file. So we start off with records, that's kind of in the first column, and then we go in 2 characters or 2 spaces here before we start player, and then underneath player where we've got those 3 fields for the name, country, birth date, that's pushed in another 2 characters. Then as we come to the end tags, we push out. So the end thing for the player lines up, so you can say, oh, this is where the player starts, this is where the player ends. Same sort of idea as indenting when you do an if, then else, end if statement in Visual Basic, really, same sort of idea. So when we view the file in Windows Notepad, we see there's 2 spaces indenting, and that's what's actually in the file. But just be aware that if you look at it in Explorer or Microsoft Edge, which we're going to show you coming up, yeah, that does change the indentation, which is kind of cool. It makes it a bit more readable, actually. But it still is actually 2. It's just that the display on the screen comes up with more, as we shall see. So there are some rules, though, for what you can put into your XML data, where we've got that name, country, and birth date. So you can't put in the actual arrowheads, the sort of greater than, less than signs, if you want to think about it mathematically. You can't put those arrowheads in as part of your data. So you couldn't put that into someone's name, and you can't put quotes or single quotes in there as part of your data as well. So what do you do if you need to put those things in? Well, you have to code them with special ampersand LT semicolon. So that means a less than sign. And when it gets translated, it'll come out a less than sign. If you've done HTML coding, you'll kind of know about this already and have probably used the substitution characters because you can't use the reserved ones. Oh, the and sign is also something which can't go in as actual data. So yeah, look, we don't use those special characters that much, but just realize they're reserved for XML's use, so you're not actually allowed to use them. Now, you are allowed to use the / for dates, even though XML uses that to indicate where the end of a tag is or the end of a field or a record. you can actually use them and it won't bomb or error out. But the thing is that when you've got these forward slashes on your dates, it's just hard to see them because you've got all those other forward slashes like that the XML is using. So it's far better in XML just to write the date as, you know, in Australia it's day, day, month, month, year, year, but just put the hyphens or the dashes in between like this. It'll just be a lot easier to see in the XML file, and that's the way we've done it in this lesson. So let's start looking at applications that can look at or create XML files. All right, so at this stage of the video, like if you want to take a break and come back later, you can. We kind of make these videos in one big slab of time, so we can just, for efficiency's sake, but look, you don't need to do the whole lesson in one sitting, okay? So just be aware of that. Now for this lesson, we need to create that XML file for our Tennis Dream Team. We've been looking at it here on the screen in its finished version, but how did we make that? How are we going to create it? So you can make your entire XML file by just carefully typing it into Windows Notepad, which comes with Windows 10 operating system. So yeah, you can start that up and you can just carefully indent your two spaces, put your arrows and your tags and all that stuff and get the whole thing typed in, and that will work fine. You just save it still as a text file because XML is plain text, but you have to put a .xml on the end. So it's not a .txt file as usual, it's a .xml. And look, all you'd have to do actually is, you know, once you got this first player record copied, sort of typed in, and you've done all that hard work, then you can just highlight that with your mouse and use Control-C, Control-V, and just Control-V in these other three records, and then just go in and change the names, countries, and birth dates, all right? So yeah, the hard bit's probably just doing that heading and getting the first player record done, and then after that it's just copy paste and easy changing. Now the only issue you're going to see with Notepad, because we're going to show you some other applications as we go through here, a Notepad has just everything all the same. It's all the same dark colored writing, there's no bolding, there's no coloring to tell you where the data is and where the tags are. So it's just one slab of black and white code. So it's not as easy to read as some other formats. So let's look at Notepad++. That's a free download you can get off the internet, and it's pretty much like Notepad, but just a little bit better, because as you can see straight away here, it's put the tags all in light blue color and bolded up kind of where our data is. So it makes it a lot easier to see and to read that file and to work on it in this Notepad++ editor. So yeah, if you want to download that and use it for making an XML file, that's great. And again, all you'd have to do is like that first player, get them all set up, and then after that it's just, you know, Control-C, Control-V, copy paste. Now because Notepad++ is used for a lot of things, you can write Python code in it, even Visual Basic code, you need to go up and click on encoding and make sure that's UTF-8. And you need to click on this language up on the menu bar here and set that to XML. That will give you this blue coloring for the tags and the dark coloring for the data and the bolding. All right, so you do have to make those two changes. So yeah, as we said, it shows the tags and the data in different colors and bolding, which makes it a lot easier to see the file. So Notepad++ is pretty good for making XML files and editing them. You can use Adobe Dreamweaver if you've got that. Some of you might use that for doing HTML. Now, if you click on one of the start tags, like for the player record here, it will automatically highlight the end tag. So you can see, oh, that's where it begins, that's where it starts. Everything inside here must be data about the player. So it's kind of got that feature, but it really doesn't have much else. And you can set up one player and copy and paste them to make the others. The thing we really don't like is that the tags are a different color, but they're kind of a purple color, and the data's in a gray color, and there's not much difference between purple and gray. But we're using Dreamweaver's light screen format here. When you use the dark screen format, maybe this works a lot better. Maybe it shows it in purple and white or something. Now, we tried to get our Dreamweaver into dark screen mode. You'd think there'd just be some easy option where you can do that, but we couldn't find it, and we just Googled for about 10 minutes and still couldn't find anything, so we gave up. But yeah, maybe in dark screen mode it does work well. If you know it does, drop us an email at passyworld@hotmail.com and let us know that. Now, we cannot easily create the XML files with Microsoft Excel, so you can't sort of edit it like Dreamweaver or Notepad++ or Notepad, but they're great for looking at XML files. So when you load up an XML file into Microsoft Excel, it comes out really nice like this as a colored in table, just like it would with an Excel spreadsheet. So it's just got this really nice friendly grid view to be able to look at things, and you don't see any of those arrowhead signs and tags and things. But you need to make sure when you're opening it, when you go File Open, it'll pop up this window and say, hey, do you want to open this up as an XML table? And you just say OK on that. So you need to select that and say OK. And then after you've clicked that OK, it's going to say, do you want us to create a schema to go with it? And you just say, yes, we do want that. So you just say OK and click on that as well. And then it'll open it up into this nice Excel looking table. Now, we can very easily then edit, delete, or even add records to our grid view in Microsoft Excel. Really nice and easy because all those tags are hidden away and out of sight and not interfering with the data. But we just have to make sure that all of the box data cells are all set to text type. Because what will happen was we went to add a new record here, so we just typed in Martin Fuchsovic's, great tennis player that we follow and do photos for, from Hungary. And when we put the data, we tried putting it in as dashes like these other ones, but Excel did us a favor, thought, oh, I know what that is, that's a date. So I'll put slashes, and I'll also change the data to be a date type. And that's not going to be too good for our XML, because our XML file really needs to just be plain text. And so, yeah, look, Excel will do that, but it's easily fixed. All you have to do is, at the top of the screen where it's got date at the moment, just click the down arrow that's there and you can pick a whole bunch of other formats. And the one you want to pick is just plain text. So we just change that date, which Excel was helping us out with, and just get it into a text date. Now, when you do change it, oh, this weird thing will happen. It'll become 35198. It's done some sort of mathematical calculation. I thought, oh, they're turning it into text. And helpful Excel thought, oh, maybe they want us to do some maths and come up with a number to go in there. But look, it's in text format now, plain text. So you can just type over the top of that dud number and you'll be able to put the hyphens in, and Excel won't do its super helpful thing of making them into slashes or some weird number. It'll just leave it as the hyphens. So what might be better is if you were going to use Excel to add, you know, say 10 more records to this, just highlight the 10 cells underneath before you start and go up to make sure you're in Table Tools, and yeah, just straight away change that format to plain text so it's not going to have any problems changing things for you. I think that will work as well. But that's just something to be aware of. Excel will try and help out with numbers and dates and things, but you just need to change them back to text for everything to be good. Now, when you save the XML file too, Microsoft Excel, of course, will want to save it as a spreadsheet. So you need to do File Save As, and then it'll want to do an Excel workbook here. As you can see, that's the default type. So you need to click on this arrow over here and you'll get a drop-down list, and you want XML Data.xml. So you need to pick that one instead and do your file save as XML data, not as an Excel workbook. Now, it'll say this message to you. It'll result in some worksheet features. Well, we don't care about that because all we want is a plain text XML file. We don't want any Microsoft spreadsheet features. So you just click continue and that'll be all good and you'll have an XML file. Okay, so when we check it though, there is one little thing that's happened from using Microsoft Excel, and that is the indentation's been changed. Excel's kind of put in this thing here and moved everything in quite a long way. But look, that doesn't matter at all. There's no rules about the indentation you have to have. So Visual Basic, all the other apps will still read this file quite okay. It's also put in this schema that it used for designing the file. So I guess under this schema or design model that's being used for this XML file, that's probably what's pushing them in with extra indentation, okay, rather than just using the plain old standard one. It's using something which is pushing them in a bit more, which kind of does make them a bit more readable, so it's kind of not all that bad really. So yeah, Excel having it in this kind of just data grid format, I think that's really the easiest way to edit your XML file. You can use Notepad++ and Notepad, but look, why not use XML? Because it's a real nice friendly format. Just gotta be a bit careful with each box that you've got in there, each cell with data in it. Make sure it's a text type, and make sure you do the file save as and get it saved as an XML file, and it doesn't just save as a Microsoft spreadsheet. All right, now for viewing XML files. So we can't create them with these apps, but Microsoft Edge is really nice for viewing the files because we get everything in all these different colors. We get indentation. It's very clear and easy for a human to look at and read. Okay, now it does something a bit funky here with the heading. Instead of having the encoding as UTF-8, for some reason it's converting it to this saying, oh, the encoding here, because it had a look through and just noticed that all the characters we're using are English language characters. It set it to this thing called Latin 1, which is a simplified coding standard, which is also called International Standards Organization ISO-8859-1. Now, what advantage that has of it changing that when it displays it, I don't know, because it hasn't actually changed in the text file. If you go and look at it in Notepad, it'll still have UTF-8 and the indenting will still be just 2 characters. But anyway, it's changed the indenting to 4 characters, which I like. It kind of makes it better to read. It's a lot easier to read. And the funny thing that it does too is it sets these little red minus signs for when a new tag starts, which is kind of helpful. This is where the file starts here. This is where our first player record starts. This is where the next player record starts. It doesn't put these blue boxes around them. I just put those around to highlight it here. Now that's kind of handy, but the thing is, don't get confused. Like, I'll fess up here. I looked at an XML file when I started learning about them. And when you double click it in Windows, it'll just open it up in Internet Explorer actually. And it showed all those little minus signs. And I thought, oh, you must have to type a little minus sign. That must be part of XML, typing a little minus sign when you're starting a new record or a player. And yeah, none of the apps liked it. They didn't like having this little minus sign that I'd typed into Notepad. So yeah, look, Edge will display them and so will Internet Explorer. But for goodness sakes, do not ever type those little minus signs into your actual XML file or you'll just mess it up and there's no way the thing's going to work. So Internet Explorer, when you're in Windows 10, I found that if there's a thing here, an orange thing, an Office thing, which is called the Office XML Handler. When you click it, you just see the old Internet Explorer symbol. So it's just using Internet Explorer. And look, it's virtually identical to Microsoft Edge. The only difference is the encoding. It actually keeps it as UTF-8. It doesn't bother just saying, oh, this is all in English and it's actually the old Latin 1 standard. Like, it doesn't give us that unnecessary conversion information. WordPad is another application you can use for editing and looking at XML files. But look, it's pretty much the same as Windows Notepad. It's just all plain text. It's not nearly as good as Edge or Internet Explorer here, where you see all the colors and all the differences. I don't know, maybe if you're doing XML files on a Mac, does WordPad come with Microsoft Office? And if you had Office for Mac, then WordPad would be the one you'd be using, because like, you wouldn't have Windows Notepad because you wouldn't have Windows 10 operating system if you're using Mac or something else. So maybe that's where Windows Notepad would be useful for you. All right, so at last, we finished talking about XML files and we've finished talking about all of the sort of common apps you'll have sitting on your computer, like, if you've got Microsoft Office, you've got Excel. If you've got Windows 10, which you'd have to have anyway, you will have Windows Notepad. You might download Notepad++ and use it. So all those things can be looked at, used to look at an XML file and to create them and edit them for some of those apps. Now let's look at a Visual Basic program and how it could create and output XML file for us. Okay, now the approach we've done so far is like use a plain text editor. What we were recommending from all that stuff we just showed you is basically open up Notepad, get this first bit typed in for your first record, whatever that happens to be, and then just go Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste crazy and make the other records. Or if you don't like seeing all those tags, you might save it at this stage, open it up in Microsoft Excel and put all your other records in Excel in that nice friendly table format, spreadsheet format, and do it that way. But either way, you'd get your XML file made. Now, another way we can start the XML file off and get it going is this Visual Basic program I'm going to show you how to write here. And what it's going to do is it's just going to write out, you know, our XML header record and just the stuff here for our file and our first player, who's Alden. So it's just going to set that up for us out of the Visual Basic program. So we don't have to worry about Notepad and, you know, making sure we got less than, greater than signs or these arrows in the right place. Make sure we've done our indentation. Visual Basic will take care of all of that and do it for us. So once we've got this program written once, anytime we needed to make an XML file, like we might be making a different XML file, which is a file of our now I've got to think off the top of my head. Maybe we're making a file just about for expenses, like what was the name of the thing we spent money on, how much did we spend, what was the date that we spent that money. Okay, you could just use the same program to spit out the basic file and then just sort of do a whole bunch of copying and pasting to make the rest of it. So it's good for building your XML file from the beginning without you having to think too much about it. Okay, so after it's created, after we've got that first record, I really like Microsoft Excel. So I just use this program I've got, make my first record, and then I'd use Excel to make the rest of the data that's going in that file. But you can use Notepad or Notepad++. So here's the program I'm going to write, the little XML file maker. So for this one, we've just made it fancy because we like doing that. We've got some labels here for what they are. We've got text boxes here where they're going to enter the data in, and a save and a clear button. Now, certain things on here have to have special names. So this text box for the name has to be called TXT name because that's what it's going to be called in the program. TXT country, and the date is TXT birth date. Okay, so they do have to have those special names. So if you're making this form to make this one yourself, make sure they've got those special names on them, and the buttons are called BTN save and BTN clear. All right, now up the top of the program, we need to just have an import. So we need to say import system.xml just to tell this program we're going to be doing XML. And then for those three text boxes, we need some internal program variables which can store the information that the user's typed in. So we've got str name, str country, and str birth date just set up as string here, all kind of in this top area of the program. And then we continue on. And look, all the processing starts then when they click that save button. So they've entered their three fields in, and they click the save button. Now, this is just kind of a utility program to make an XML file. It's not part of some application. So look, we're not going to put validation in, which will just take more time and more work and complicate it. Because look, we assume an experienced programmer is using this, or someone who knows what they're doing, and they're going to type the data in carefully. And if they check their XML file later and it's wrong, well, they can just retype it in or edit it in Microsoft Excel or Notepad or something and fix it up. So there's no validation, right? So we're just putting whatever they put into the text box, which we assume they're smart and they've done it properly, put that into str name, str country, and str birth date. Then we have to dimension a writer. So we need to have a output writer that's going to write XML text. And the file we're going to write is called tennisplayers.xml. So we have to have that in there and tell it it's going to be a UTF-8 encoding. And then we have write the start of the documents true. So that means that it can put onto the heading, the XML header into that file which we've made. And then we set up our indentation. So we want to have this indentation happening, in the number of thing is 2 spaces. So we're just hard coding that in, that the writer indentation we want to use when we write our XML equals 2. And you can get a copy of this code in the downloads that go with this lesson. So just go to the video description. There's a downloads link there. All of the code and everything for you is there to save you time. You know, if you just want to copy and paste it in and play around with it and modify it. So let's continue. So the save button, then we get into calling a separate function. So we've written our start element now, that records that goes right up the top of the file. Okay, so we're gradually putting that XML file together, assembling it, which we've been looking at in this lesson. And We're going to use a function though, a separate function to loop around and to just write all of the records that we need to, the data records that we need to, okay? So, which in this case is just one record. So remember, this is just a little program to write your first record, then you can take it into an editor and just Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste and change stuff to make whatever other records you need. So this is only going to be writing out one XML record to get you started with the file. So yeah, that function's going to do the actual individual players, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. So we need to pass into that function, and you need to have done, I suppose, our functions lesson previously to understand this. We need to pass in the name, the country, value that we've got off the form, the birth date, which we've got off the form, and also we need to pass in writer, that we want to write output is what we want to do with the XML for this. And then when we come back from that and we've written all the player records, we're just going to be writing the end element and an end document and closing the file. Okay, so that's just the end elements where it's going to put, you know, like records, /records or whatever to finish the file off, and send out a message box that the player record which they typed in and they clicked that save button, that yeah, that did save successfully. So remember, we need to be user friendly to the user there and let them know what's going on all the time and let them know it's saved. Otherwise I'll keep clicking that save button thinking, oh, has anything happened? Has it saved my record? What's going on? So yeah, always give acknowledgement messages right at the end of a process. So here's the function that writes out all of the individual player records. So what we've got here is it's going to write the start element here, the player, and that's going to be, you know, the start of this particular record. And then we're going to write the name in there. We're going to get the incoming name off the form. So you know how we've passed in here to this function incoming name, because when we were back in the subroutine we put str name that we got off the form, so that's what should be in here. So it should have got Alden in there basically, because our form had Alden typed into it, the first player. So it should take Alden set kick and put that in here, write that element out. It should do the country, okay, the start element, it'll do the two arrowheads with the country thing and then put the country in there. So it should do all of that writing, and that's going to be all the code that we need to write our one XML record, okay? So down the bottom here too, we haven't actually got a returned value that the function returns, and VB will put this little green squiggle line and have a warning message complaining about it, but that doesn't matter. The program just runs and works anyway in any case. So when we test this and try it out, we put in Alden Setkic, our first player, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and 21st of the 12th, 1987 with the dashes for his birth date. And when we clicked the save, it went off and did all that program code, and it said it has been written successfully. So it's given us a big OK there. So we better go off and just browse that XML output file with Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer. And yeah, we can see, hey, it's set up the whole file for us. And it's put in the stuff for Alden, which we had on our form over here. So that's really cool. The XML file is all ready and going, and we didn't have to worry about putting all the arrowheads in and all the tags and stuff. That Visual Basic program did it all for us. Now it has done, excuse me, one other thing here. It's added in that header this thing standalone equals true. And I did research that on Stack Overflow. But now I can't remember what it's for. But look, basically it doesn't matter if it's there or it doesn't matter if it isn't there, okay? It's just something VBNet writes in there. So don't worry about that standalone equals true there. Just leave it in there, it'll be fine. And notice that when you actually look at it in Notepad, standalone equals yes, it doesn't equal true. So again, Internet Explorer has done a little bit of changing from what it really is in the file. But look, don't worry about that. Standalone equals yes, standalone equals true. It doesn't do any harm. You can just leave it in there. So from here, we've got our first record, and we can easily take it into Notepad or XML or Microsoft Excel, edit it up and put our other records in quite easily. Now we can't actually get the program to write more than one record. That's a bit tricky. Without writing a really complicated array to store the records in, without manually joining on all the tags ourselves and stuff. So look, the next lesson I'm writing XML files will show a really neat way of doing that with a built-in kind of methods and things that VB supplies for XML to take all that hard work out. So we're not going to show you how to code and build with your bare hands and write out 4 separate records to an XML file. It's unnecessary because, as you'll see in the next lesson, there is such an easier way of doing it. All right, so we've done what XML files are. We've done how to do them in Notepad and Edge and Microsoft Excel. We've already spent 40 minutes on this tutorial. My goodness. It's a really hot day here in Melbourne today. We're having this unseasonable heat, and like I'm boiling in here because I'm under the lights, and I can't have the aircon on because it makes too much noise. So I'm just about sticking to the seat. Anyway, stop complaining, let's get on with it. So we're going to write some programs now that can read in our XML file. So we made that 1 record file, we typed in our other records, we've got our 4 players now. Let's look at how VB could read that in. So here's our XML file, just looking at it in Internet Explorer because it looks nicest in Internet Explorer of all the different colors and highlighting. There are 4 players and our 4 records. That's all beautiful. That's a beautiful looking XML file we got right there. And we're just going to make this little form, and all it's got on it is just this label heading and a show button. So when you click BTN show, that's going to do all the work. And you click BTN show, and it'll actually is going to loop through this file, finding all the different records and displaying them one at a time, just in pop-up message boxes. So our first guy, Alden, it's put his information in here, okay? And we see that little message box. Now, it might not be in the middle of your screen. It might be off to the side or something. It's kind of a bit iffy. I haven't figured that out, if you can directly position message boxes in certain locations, because it just seems to be where Visual Basic feels like putting them. But when you click OK on that, what it'll do is it moves on to the next record. So it finds Anna over here in the XML file and her details, pulls out just her details and gives us this for some labels, and we can see her information in a little pop-up message box. And we click OK on her, and then it goes to the next one, Bernarda, shows her information. Click OK on Bernarda, and it'll show the last guy, John Patrick Smith, the Australian guy. Okay, and when you click OK there, then it finishes, and we're just back to the form with the heading and the show button. All right, so you just need to make a form that's really just got 1 button on it, BTN show, and all the rest is done in the program. So let's have a look at the program. So this is just our version 1 program here we're doing for reading XML files. So we need to dimension the name, the country, the birth date, and a message as well that we're going to assemble everything into, which you'll see in a little while. Define the variables for reading the XML file. So these are just XML-y type things, XMLD, node list, node. That's all part of this system.xml, so make sure you've got that imports up the top. And we're just using some things which are kind of part of that imports. And I have to do a shout out here and thank my friend Quentin. Quentin actually helped me out with a lot of this code in this lesson because I was sort of looking around the internet and I couldn't find really good stuff about XML files, good videos about it or information. And so Quentin, yeah, he'd done some investigation and had, because I usually do CSV files, I haven't really done XMLs a whole lot. So yeah, Quentin helped me out. Thank you, Quentin, for all of your help on this. So yeah, what we do here is we've got this thing, XML LD was for loading. So we use the load method and we can load up that file we've got, which was just called players1, was the file we're using with those 4 tennis players in it. And node list is part of the imports, and that lets XML know about the structure that's coming in. Okay, so we say that the node list, what the records are in this file is they're all called player. So you know how when we first start a record, we have the arrowheads and player inside it. And when we finish our first player at the bottom, we have the arrowheads and a slash player inside there. This is just telling XML, as you're reading through there, Visual Basic, when you spot a player and slash player, that is sort of the boundaries between each record. And then we just go through with a for loop. So for each sort of individual record node that we've got in that file, we need to just get inner text here. So anyway, let's just explain it. First up, so the node list, as we were saying, picture's worth 1,000 words. I forgot about the pictures I've done here. All right, so that's our XML file, players1 XML that we're reading in, okay? So that's why we've got our load file here is players1 XML. So what you've got in the program here needs to match up with what you actually made in your Notepad file or your wherever you've made that 4 players file for your dream team. And this is like player and /player. So that's where the records begin and end with those tags. So by coding this, we're just telling Visual Basic that for our particular file, we decided to name each record a player record, and we called it player. So it's just telling Visual Basic that. Now, all these other things down here, we've got a for each. So each time it finds a player sort of tag here, we're saying each time you find one of those, do all this stuff and then find the next one. So then go down the file and there's another one hiding down here and do that next one, okay? So that's just your for next loop. It's going to keep going through, and when it runs out of player tags to find, it knows that it's finished. So that's our for next loop. And what these things do, the inner text, what that does is it says, okay, go into this thing here, and it should start with name. So you should see this thing name. And then the inner text is this stuff in here, Alden Setkick. And this is saying, just grab that inner text out of the middle and ignore that finishing tag, okay? And then when you go down to the next one, it should start with country. So, hey, yeah, it does start with country. What do I need to do? I need to just grab that inner text. So I just grab Bosnia-Herzegovina and pull that out. And so it pulls these, this data out here, right? The Alden, Bosnia, all those things. It just pulls the data out using this inner text, and it's going to store that data that's pulled out in our program variables we defined right up the start, like our string name, string country, string birth date. And then we're going to assemble those variables together here to make the message that comes out on the screen. So this was just making a 3-line message that had name. So we sort of hand coded in these little labels here, name, country, birth date, with some spacing to make them all line up. And the string name, it just got, okay, it was on the first record, so I grabbed Alden from the inner text, and we see Alden, his country in there, and his date in there, okay? So it's sort of assembling this all together, joining it up with ampersands to join all the bits and pieces together. Also have carriage return line feeds to spit out some of them on separate lines. And then it just message boxes out that whole string message that it assembled. So that's how we see the message box. And that's the end of our little read XML program that's going to display using message boxes. That's all finished. So this is kind of the same approach we used when we did the arrays lesson. If you remember back to that, the first thing we did was we wanted to go through an array and see what was in it. We wanted to just work our way down the array. So we just put out the things with message boxes one after each other. And then if you remember that lesson, after that we used list boxes to put things out. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to write a second program, which is actually really pretty much the same code as in that program we just did. But this version 2 program, instead of putting out like 4 message boxes after each other, where people have to click OK and stuff like that, we're just going to have 3 list boxes on here where the data can just come out in the list boxes. So take your version 1 program, copy the big high-level folder at the top, and this is going to be the version 2. Now on the form, we're just going to actually have some stuff on the form now rather than just a show button. So I've got a group box here first. That's that white line going around the outside. And on the text property for the group box, it would have said group box 1. We just sort of backspace that out. So it doesn't say group box 1, it just gives us a nice little rectangle for everything to go inside. And then we just dragged in 3 plain little old labels, and they don't need special names, but we needed to put for their text property name, country, birth date. Then we dragged out 3 list boxes, and they do need special names because we're going to refer to those in the program. So this one's LST names, LST countries, LST birth dates. So you need to name those in their name property with those exact names, or the code we're going to do next won't work. All right, so the code is really quick because we're just using everything we had in version 1 and we're just changing right down the bottom of the program. So, you know, down the bottom of the program in that loop where we're putting out the text boxes one after each other, where we strung together the name, country, birth date and put it out as a message box, just delete those lines of code right here, those 4 different lines of code, delete them out of the program and put these ones in instead. So we're just going to have each time we're doing a player, take the player's name and add that into the list names box. Take whatever country they are and put that in the list countries. Take their birth date and add that on as a new item in the list birth dates. And what will happen is that you will get, as that loop runs through and finishes, you'll get all of their names put in this list box, all their countries put in that list box, and all their birth dates put in the third list box. All right, so that's kind of nice. We can just see it clearly displayed on the screen all at once, so we don't have to worry about clicking OKs on message boxes and things like that, all right? So that could be useful, knowing how to display an XML file in a set of list boxes. But in the next lesson, writing XML files, we'll look at a much better way using data tables, and you can also use data grid views as well. So if you're not from Australia, maybe you don't need to look at this next bit. Okay, the next couple of slides are for people from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, doing software development as their VCE end of high school course. So here's some old exam questions. Question 14, XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. Oh, well, they told us what it was. I'd spent hours memorizing that. Which one of the following is true? An XML data file is designed only to display, no, it can be used for so many other things. We just used it for our tennis dream team. So we didn't even have a web page. So it's not limited to web pages. So that's definitely wrong. It's not A. B, an XML file will work as expected if some of the data is modified. Yeah, exactly. Like we wanted to change the player name from Alden to Anna in the second record. So we were changing our data all the time and everything worked fine. So B looks like a definite possibility. C, an XML file never works as expected if some data is modified. No, that's what we did. We had Anna, then we had Alden, and then you could go in and edit it if you want to. No, C's complete and utter lies. It's not C. D, an XML data file is interchangeable. Yes, it is. You can put it between all those different applications. But with an HTML file, no, remember we told you. They might both have wheels, just like a car has wheels and a giant passenger jet has wheels, but that's where the similarity ends. A giant passenger jet is not like a car. I can't park a A300 Airbus out in my driveway here. Well, I'm not rich enough to have a big enough house to do that yet, but maybe someday. Yeah, forget it. So B is the answer. B is the correct answer here. And just one more question. This is some XML file that's given to you, and they wanted you to name 3 fields contained in this file. Okay, so the file is called company and it ends in /company, so that's the main file. And the fields, you might think, oh yeah, Fireplace Enterprises looks like a field. We've got a value in here, maybe that's a field, but isn't this kind of the start and end of the record, staff ID /staff ID, that's a start and end of a staff record? The name, Sue Jenkins, yes, these are definitely fields. So staff name and salary here are both definitely fields. So we've got 2 of them. It's just a bit iffy about the third one. Are we going to use staff ID or are we going to use this name thing? And this is where students had problems on the exam. So everyone, the average mark was 2 out of 3. Everyone got staff name and salary. Pretty much everyone doing this exam got that right. But the third field was actually staff ID. Now, this was a tricky question because that looks like it's just the record delimiter. This is where the staff record finishes. This is where it starts. This is where it finishes. But because it had that data in there, the primary key, and we're going to be looking at that in the next lesson for writing XML files, because XML files need to have a primary key in case people have the same names and stuff. But yeah, that's all for the next lesson. So maybe after the next lesson, this would have made a lot more sense and you would have found it easier. But you should have been able to figure out staff name and salary and got 2 out of 3 like everyone did in Victoria, and maybe you struggled with this one, okay? But Fireplace Enterprises, no, that wasn't considered by the examiners to be a field. They just considered that to be a header record that gave the name of the company. So further reading, XML files, yeah, Mark Kelly, the legend of information about VC software development. He's got a really good PowerPoint on his page. So the link for the page is up here. And yeah, that goes through a lot of XML file stuff in more detail than we have. So if you really, really want to get a good solid picture of XML and do it further reading, look that up on the internet and download the presentation and go through it. Now, there is no challenge task for this lesson because this lesson was sort of an introduction to XML files and learning a bit about them. The next lesson, next week, writing XML files, that's where we're really going to get into XML files, and we'll give you a challenge task probably at the end of that one. But there is no challenge task for this one. The next lesson we're going to do, it's really going to demonstrate the power of object-oriented programming. So you don't have to build everything with your bare hands. We've done a little bit of bare hands building in this particular lesson, editing XML files and things ourselves. But now Visual Basic has like these cool plugins and kind of things you can use where you can get like this form that you can enter all the different players in, and it's got a navigator to flip through them. You can save each one as you do it, plus when you want to add a new one, X to delete one if you want to take a player out of there. And yeah, look, that's really cool. It's like this whole little XML processing system which comes as part of Visual Basic. Just like in your cars these days, you kind of got that sat-nav system in the car. In the old days, you had to get out road maps and do it all with your bare hands and stuff to find your way around anywhere. Now there's just GPS that's on a screen straight in front of you in your car. And that's what this is like. It's like just GPS, so you don't have to look at maps manually or do anything like that. It's all done for you with this, and it's really cool. As you can tell, I'm really excited about it, and I can't wait to show you that next week. We do have our full programming course, remember, on PassyWorldOfICT.com/program. So you can go there to see what order you should have been doing these lessons in. So if when we mentioned the arrays lesson and list boxes, you thought, I don't ever remember doing arrays. Have I done that lesson? What were list boxes? You could go back and look through here and find out where the arrays one is and look it up to refresh your memory. So look, thanks for joining us in another lesson. This should be very useful to you because XML files are really important in computing. They're used so much for passing data around between applications. And yeah, enjoy your learning, and we will see you in the next lesson. Subscribe to our channel because we're putting out videos once a week, and if you're a subscriber, you get notified and you won't miss out on any of the videos. All right, it's goodbye from us till the next lesson.